Some of today's stories contain sensitive topic matter, and as such, viewer discretion is advised. And if you have a story you would like to send my way, go to astheravendreams.com and click the button to do so. And of course, thank you. I have a paranormal story that I had kind of kicked from my memory for a couple of decades, but that recently came flooding back to me. My parents recently retired and decided that they wanted to sell their home and move into a smaller house closer to where myself and their grandkids are. And this meant that they needed to go through all the random things that they had saved from my childhood. I was going through one of the boxes, and I found a journal that I used to write in. I remembered that I would write my paranormal experiences in this journal when I was like 10 years old. I know that sounds weird, but as a little girl, I didn't know a lot about the paranormal, and I was apparently an aspiring author. So I just wanted to write things that were happening to me in my life. I actually wrote a lot in this journal, and looking back, it actually is kind of terrifying. I'm not going to rewrite the entire thing here, I'm just going to reiterate some of the highlights and weird parts. Also, as a bit of a for the record, I did not make up any of these events. I 100% remember them happening now and in very vivid details. I know a lot of people may think, oh, you were a child, so there's no way you didn't add fictional details, but this was basically my diary, and I was writing it for myself, so I had no reason to add anything extra or fictional to the entries. In one of the entries, I wrote a very detailed experience about the first terrifying night that I had with a paranormal entity. The beginning of the entry was about what I saw when I went to bed. There was this weird thing that kept hovering in the corner of my room, and I wrote that exactly. Hovering. It was the shape of a young boy, but something about it was creepier than anything that I had ever seen. Like it wasn't quite human, but was shaped like one. My description was this exactly. I saw a little boy floating in the corner of my room. He was see-through, but darker than the shadows. I feel like he kept staring at me, and it was making me feel cold. I tried to ignore him, but I keep feeling like he is watching me do everything in my room. The next time I wrote, which was literally the next day, I wrote several notes about being touched by this shadow child. I wrote about how I was sitting and doing my homework, and that this thing had grabbed my hair. I actually remember this in detail. I was sitting there at my desk doing my math homework, and I felt what felt like a hand grab my ponytail and pull my hair hard. Like my head went backwards hard. This actually happened more than once. It was a few times, but I only wrote about it the one time. I can remember that I actually stopped wearing a ponytail in my bedroom to get this thing to stop pulling my hair. Another one that I wrote was about one of the most intense nights that I had with this entity, which was the first and only time that I'd had sleep paralysis. I know that a lot of people don't believe in paranormal happenings during sleep paralysis, but this was absolutely paranormal, and it was terrifying. I wrote about how I was lying in bed that night, and I woke up suddenly. I was staring at the ceiling, and I could see the floating boy basically form out of the darkness in my room, and he slowly descended from the top of my room and stopped right in front of my face. The whole time he was staring at me, I was feeling like the room was spinning, and I thought that I was going to get sick, but in my own written words, I couldn't even turn my head to throw up. The entire time that this thing was staring at me, face to face in the darkness, I could feel how cold the room was, and I could feel how angry and violent the spirit wanted to be. I wrote that in detail too. The whole time this boy was staring at me, I knew that he wanted to hurt me. He wanted to kill me because he was angry that I was alive and that he was not. There were a few other events that I wrote about, though these were the more interesting ones. In multiple entries, I wrote about how cold my room was. I wrote about how just sitting in my room made me feel scared and nauseous, which was definitely this entity's fault. There were several instances where I would come home from school and find that my bed was a mess, more so than I left it. Like, the blankets and pillows were all over the floor. And several times where all the stuff that I had on my vanity was knocked all over the floor. Then, in one of the entries when I was 11 years old, so around a year after the first entry, I wrote that he was gone. The entire page is me talking about how he had left me, and how much of a relief it was that he was finally able to cross over. Just like that, he was apparently gone from my life. And I actually recall how weird it was to me that he would torment me and scare me so much just to leave me alone one random day. I have no idea what kind of spirit he was, but he definitely seemed malicious. It started out fairly benign with the hair thing and the staring, but that night with the paralysis almost felt like he was putting me in my place, showing me how dark he truly was. Reading my old journal really brought back the flood of memories about how scared I was as a child, and how haunting this thing really happened to be. I'm just glad that it did eventually leave me alone, and that I was able to move on, and mostly forget about it, even if finding this journal did bring it all back to my mind. I work a really weird shift at a big corporate warehouse that is open all around the clock, and, as such, I usually work until around 2 in the morning. Obviously, this really screws up your sleep schedule, and can be incredibly stressful in the long run. The job doesn't matter. What does matter is when I would get home, that being 2 to 3 in the morning. At the time that I was working this shift pretty regularly, I was renting a really small house from my aunt that was actually owned by my grandmother when she passed away. It was the smallest house that I had ever seen. Literally one bedroom, a kitchen, a bathroom, and then a tiny dining area with a living room in one. It then also had a basement that was a single room with the washer and dryer hookups. That was it. I've had friends that lived in apartments that had more square feet than this house did, but that's neither here nor there. So, as mentioned, my grandmother lived in this house at the end of her life, and I'm pretty sure that she was there even after she passed away. For the years that I knew her, my grandmother was a bit of a joker. She liked to play little pranks on people or poke fun at people, and she knew how to hit you with insults that left you in tears because of how funny her delivery was, and how much it hurt you inside. She could have been a stand-up comic had that been a major thing when she was young, but instead she just cracked her jokes at us that loved her. Hell, I'm pretty sure that her dying words were, "It's about damn time. I was ready 20 years ago." And that's the kind of person that she was. It's because of this attitude that I'm pretty certain she still resides in her house. The first time that I noticed something was up was one night when I had come home from work around 2 in the morning. I got home, and I was seriously hungry, so I decided that I wanted to make myself an egg sandwich. I remember that specifically because it was something my grandma always made when I was little. Obviously, egg sandwiches are basic and there's nothing special about them, but as I was making it, I started talking out loud about how much I missed being little and how much I missed my grandma making them for me. No sooner than me making this comment, I hear a smash on the floor next to me, and one of the eggs from the carton had somehow managed to jump out of its case and onto the floor. I remember that happening, and me just looking at it and then screaming, "Dang it, Grandma, now I have to clean that up." And again, as soon as I mentioned that, the roll of paper towels fell onto the floor from the counter. It was at that point that I was certain that it was her messing with me, mostly because I know exactly what joke she was making. When I was a kid, I had accidentally dropped an egg on the floor, and I remember her yelling at me about how she now had to clean it up. It was just too perfect, honestly. I was saying that I missed her making me food as a kid, and she decided to mock me by doing to me what I did to her when I was young. I cleaned it up, and the whole time I was just laughing thinking about her, and telling her that I missed her humor and whatnot. I'm going to be completely open about this. It really felt like she was sitting at my table and laughing at me. Like, haha, now you have to clean up the messes that I make. And I loved it. I have a few more stories about my trickster of a grandma, but honestly, this was my favorite that I felt I should share. She's done some other things to me, like opening my fridge overnight, opening cabinets, dumping my laundry onto the floor, but honestly, it's never been anything terribly malicious. Just my grandma being herself in the afterlife. It's actually kind of nice to be reminded frequently that she is still around me, even if it means I have to constantly be cleaning and picking things up. I used to live in this house when I was younger, since the time I was born to maybe the age of 6. It was a big house. It had 3 floors and 2 kitchens, one on the 3rd floor and one on the 2nd floor. I lived with my dad, grandpa, and 2 of my uncles, with my cousin. They all have stories about this house. They all experienced paranormal activity. However, the children would experience more, such as scratching on the walls, voices, shadow figures, you name it. My room was on the 3rd floor. I had 2 closets. One was just a normal closet, but the other closet had a crawling tunnel that would lead to the master bedroom, just like in the movie Caroline. We kids would go and play there. However, I remember vividly seeing an obituary in that closet of a little girl with curly blonde hair. I asked all my cousins that visited the house if they remembered seeing the obituary, and they all saw it, but they remember the little girl's appearance is all different. I remember her with blonde curly hair, my cousin remembers the girl with black curly hair, and my other cousin remembers the girl with red hair. I've asked my aunts and uncles if they remember the obituary, but none of them saw it. Only the younger children. I remember my father would tell me that when I was a toddler, I'd be laughing at something and playing with someone who wasn't there, and that the locks would lock themselves as well. We all moved out when I was 6 or 7 years old. However, in the new house, I would experience the same things. Now that I'm older, I remember more. I would be home alone in my bedroom upstairs and hear footsteps downstairs coming close to me. In my sleep, I felt someone grab my ankle and pull me down a little. I would have recurring nightmares about a girl in a white dress with long black hair chasing me. I would hear glass fall and break, but nothing broke. Once, when I was about 11 years old, I was waiting for my friend outside. She lives right across from me in the complex, and while I was waiting, I was jumping off the porch and climbed back up to jump back off again and buy time. I kept doing that, and then I went to look at my reflection in the window, and after I jumped off the porch, I saw some other girl jump off after me in the reflection. She had long, dark hair, too, like in my nightmares. But I was alone. Sometime later, my dad had a new girlfriend. She started to live with us, and she would feel that the house was haunted as well. She finally had enough and wanted to get the house blessed. So, that happened. As the priest was blessing the house, we were all just following him, but I started to feel weird and uncomfortable. My body was getting sore. There was pain in all of my joints. It felt like growing pain, but everywhere. When the priest was blessing my room, he said to us, "This room has the most energy in the entire house." I wasn't shocked, to be honest, because I already knew that. After the blessing, I told my father's girlfriend that my body was hurting, and she went and massaged my body. I was doing exercises and stretches. My neck cracked, all of my knuckles cracked, and my back as well, which I thought was very weird. I then went straight to sleep after. However, after that day, I had never had those recurring dreams. I never heard footsteps again, no shadows, no voices, nothing. It's been probably 7 years since, and I haven't experienced any paranormal activities since that happened. Now, I constantly question myself. Did she follow me from the other house? Did she try to possess me? Was she good? Bad? What do you think? I have a bit of a weird story that I wanted to share because I'm not really sure what to do with the situation. This isn't about me or my child, but my nephew. My sister and her family moved from the East Coast to the Midwest, to the city that I'm actually living in. They did this to be closer to the rest of our family. She moved away when she was 20, but after having kids and spending time away, her and her husband decided that they wanted to move somewhere a bit more quiet, so they decided to move back here. Apparently, the whole process had been incredibly difficult, getting a house and living in an extended stay kind of hotel. However, they did find a house that they decided to purchase, and everything was good to go with it. However, she said that her son seemed to react to the house in a weird way. She said that while they were looking at the house, her son, Brady, who is 3 and very intelligent and vocal, looked like he was scared of something. The entire time they were walking around the house, he just seemed really quiet and reserved, and his eyes looked like he wanted to cry. Then they got to one of the rooms that was obviously a kid's room, and she told him that this would be his bedroom. As soon as she said that, he said, "We can't live here. They already live here." Obviously, a bit weird, but my sister told him that no one lived there right now, and that they were going to be moving in. He then burst into tears telling her that they cannot live in this house, and he was aggressively adamant about it. I will say that I understand that this would be an awkward situation to be in. Your 3-year-old son telling you that he didn't want to live in a house because they already live there, but they'd already signed the paperwork and the house was practically theirs. Plus, they weren't going to let a 3-year-old tell them that they couldn't own the house. He is a little kid after all. She then said that on the day that they were moving into the house, Brady spent most of the day outside, sitting in the backyard, and just talking, staring at the house. After a while of loading things into the house, she went out back to ask him who he was talking to, and he said, My new sister. It is best to mention now that Brady is the youngest of 3 boys. He's 3, and his brothers are 10 and 7. They made sure that they couldn't have any more kids, so this wasn't some kind of premonition he was having about them having another one. This obviously kind of freaked her out, so she told him that it was time for him to come inside and have lunch, and he told her that his new sister couldn't come inside the house with them because she was trapped outside. She just kind of said, "Okay," and picked Brady up and brought him in. The entire time he was inside and eating his peanut butter and jelly sandwich, he was just staring out the window in the backyard. He was smiling and even waving. I feel like most of the time this could be acceptable. He is 3, but she said that it was actually kind of creepy how he was just staring and giggling. And as soon as he finished eating, he said he wanted to go back outside to play with her. She let him go back out and said that he was having a good time, but the whole thing really creeped her out. They've been living in the house for about 2 months now, and she says that he hasn't had any of the issues that he had when they first showed him the house. But he's been constantly talking about his sister and how much he enjoys spending time with her. The way she sees it, so long as this sister doesn't cause any negative events, then it's not really a huge deal. For the most part, it seems like it's a kind spirit of a little girl that just wants to play with him, but if it gets any worse, then she said she'll go through with a cleansing or something. I know this isn't super creepy, but it's definitely a bit of a spooky paranormal story, as there's absolutely some kind of spirit there that is playing with my nephew. Maybe Brady has a really strong connection with the paranormal, or maybe this spirit is a guardian of sorts, but either way, she seems to be his new best friend. This all happened back when I was around 6 or 7 years old, and I lived in the old house that I grew up in. It was a nice house, but I swear that throughout my entire childhood, there was this weird feeling that I always got while I was in certain rooms or during certain times of the day. Being so young, I obviously didn't have any understanding of the paranormal, but nowadays, I can look back and think about how creepy the whole thing was. I remember that during one of these events, I was sitting in my room and just staring at the wall in the middle of the night. For some reason, I couldn't sleep, and my brain was telling me that I shouldn't close my eyes. Like, it was in flight mode, and causing me to have a bit of anxiety. Again, super young, so I didn't know what anxiety felt like. What ended up escalating the whole thing was, while I was laying there and just watching the wall, I saw the door to my room slowly open. It wasn't like the door just shifted in the frame and opened, but that the knob actually turned and the door opened like someone was coming into my room. I sat there and stared for a few minutes, but after several moments of no one coming into my room, I started to freak out. I got up from my bed, and I went over to look out into the hallway and see if someone was there, but there was no one. I remember noping it out of there and walking into my mom's room. My dad worked nights at this point, and I asked her if I could sleep in there. She asked if I was okay, and I told her what had happened with the door, and I just said I was scared. She told me that it would be okay, and then moved over so I could lie down. I hopped into the bed, she told me goodnight, and then fell back asleep pretty much instantly. I remember lying there for several moments just trying to fall asleep, but I started getting that feeling again that something was watching me. I opened my eyes, and as soon as I did, I saw what looked like a child standing near the door of the room. Except they had no details whatsoever. The child was completely nothing more than a shadow, but they looked solid. I know that sounds really weird, but it's the only way that I can think to describe what he looked like. I just laid there watching the shadow thing stand there and slowly make its way across the room to the door. Then, as soon as it got to the door, I swear that I saw this thing look at me and smile, though the smile was just more darkness. The second it smiled at me, I watched it reach up to the bedroom door and grab the handle. The next thing I know, the door flung open and slammed open against the wall. My mom jumped up and looked over at the door, and then down at me. I had obviously jumped up staring at the door too, and I had started crying with how freaked out I was getting. My mom asked me if I was okay, and then asked me what had happened. I told her that I saw a shadow boy open the door. My mom dismissed what I said. It sounded a bit impossible, admittedly, but she then got up and went out to look to see if there was someone in the house. After about 5 minutes, she came back and basically just shrugged it off and told me to go back to sleep. That was honestly the creepiest night that happened when I was a kid. I saw that weird shadow boy several times after this happened, but he never really did anything aggressive like this. I think because I never showed him that I was scared of him anymore, mostly because I didn't want him to do anything else. I saw him in the middle of the night multiple times throughout the years, but I haven't seen him for well over a decade at this point. I know some people may not think that this is super scary or anything, but I hated dealing with the weird little shadow person as a kid. That said, I'm just glad that he hasn't shown himself for a while, and I hope that it stays that way. When I was a junior in college, I lived in a fraternity house with 40+ other guys. As you can imagine, getting any personal time for studying, relaxing, or just peace and quiet was beyond rare. In that December before Christmas break, one of my friends suggested that we drive a few hours north. I went to school in Michigan, to their family cottage where we could all just unwind before final exams and the much-needed winter break. As we drove up to the cottage, it was picturesque. Snow softly falling, beautiful trees surrounding the property, frozen lake illuminated by the cottage's exterior lights. It was just what we needed. Think of a Thomas Kincaid painting, as cliche as it sounds. His family had been coming up to this lake for a number of years and had only recently, within the past 5 years or so, purchased this place from an elderly couple that had passed and had lived there their entire lives. Throughout his childhood, they would always pass by this house and remark that it was haunted. Since the folks that lived there were retired, they weren't as active as the other lake dwellers, and being that their home sat a little further off the water and was canopied by trees, it always seemed to be in the shadows and never in the sun, which gave it that additional spooky look and feel. When the couple did ultimately pass, his family purchased it with the intentions of building a more modern lake house in its stead. But I digress. So we pull into the driveway and trudged up the walkway through 6 inches of soft, powdery snow. Once we got inside, we immediately started to unload our groceries and began the dinner process, of which I was in charge. The place was cozy, warm, and something you would expect an older person's home to look and feel like. A fire was lit, warming the place, and I had just started cooking some steaks and shrimp in the kitchen. As college kids, you can imagine the excitement and luxury we felt when we opened the freezer and saw that it was stocked with steaks, shrimp, chicken. We'd been living on macaroni and cheese, so this was something that we were even more excited about. I had just mixed a drink, the fire was warm, and the radio was on. We couldn't have been happier. To get the scene and layout of the property, the house was sitting about 50 yards from the water and on a slight hill. The nearest neighbor was over half a mile away, and the drive up was about 300 yards from the road. So we were nestled back in relative isolation. There had also been a steady snowfall that evening, so there was about 6 to 8 inches of snow surrounding the house and covering the deck. So if, let's say, a squirrel had walked up to the house, its tracks would have been easily seen as the exterior lights illuminated the entire exterior. Even sensor lights were installed along the side walkway. We felt as safe as one could be. It was nearing 9 p.m., and we were starting to feel it and unwind. We poured another drink, and the food was nearly done. The smell of cooked steak wafted through the house. We all had these smiles on our faces, knowing we were living the life while the other guys back at school were living on top of each other and dealing with the nightly chaos that only a gaggle of college boys living under one roof could create. The juxtaposition was stark, and we couldn't have been happier. Dinner was nearing being finished, and the police's Every Little Thing She Does Is Magic was on the radio. This was 1994, so no iPods. We were old school, and we tuned it to a local radio station. The days when you felt that extra connection when the station played a song that you loved, like you and the DJ were on the same page with what good music was. We were feeling it right when the song was feeling it too. We cranked the volume and started dancing around. Life couldn't get any better. A nice buzz, a great meal on the way, in a cozy tucked-away cabin, holidays right around the corner, a roaring fire. As a young man who grew up modestly, it was one of those moments. Until it wasn't. As we cranked the volume up to, we'll just say pretty loud, we heard the 3 loudest knocks on the back door. It stopped us, and the police probably, right in our tracks. It was so obvious that someone was at the back door that we all just stared at each other with a scared, confused look. Who in their right mind was out on a winter night and at our door? Who could possibly be disturbing? A chill ran through me immediately because no matter who was at the door, it wasn't a good thing. My friend, whose family owned the place, ran to the back door and came roaring back with a look of sheer terror, and he said, "Someone's in the house." The back door was slightly opened and someone had apparently slipped in the house. I can't describe the fear that gripped me. We panicked and froze. What should we do? Grab the fireplace poker? A kitchen knife? What was this person's intentions? What were they armed with? Why had they knocked and announced their presence only to slip into a hiding place? I can't stress how loud the knocks on the door were. It wasn't one of those, "did you hear that" moments. It was a needle off the record moment when you all arrive at the same thoughts at the same time and realize something bad is about to happen. We all caught our breath and did a room-to-room search armed with our household items, like mentioned above. By the time we got back to the main room, with the fireplace, we glanced outside to see where the snow tracks originated from, expecting to see snow prints from the road, or heaven forbid the woods. We were stunned to find that the snow was undisturbed. The back deck where the door was slightly open showed no sign of anyone that had walked up. The steps, the deck itself, the walkway leading up were all covered with the 6 to 8 inches of fresh snow. No one had approached the house from any direction. What the heck was going on here? Whatever it was, there was no person in the house. We were stuck in a cabin with something that was very upset about us disturbing them. We all quickly surmised that the old couple that had once lived there wasn't happy about their nightly routine being replaced with loud music and dancing kids. This insight offered us little comfort. After we finished dinner, we all slept in the master bedroom on the same bed. The idea of being alone and disturbing whatever lurked in that house was too frightening. The night came and went without incident, almost as if the ghost had made its point and was smug in knowing how much we were afraid. In the morning, we packed up and drove out of there in a hurried manner. In the daylight, we all looked back at the snow surrounding the house. It was as pristine as the night before. Not a flake seemed out of place. But I will never forget those 3 knocks. I'ma just jump right into the story. I was up at 3 a.m. doing who knows what, but I got tired and wanted to go to sleep already. I got up to go use the restroom when I heard my dogs barking in the living room. I told them to quiet down, thinking that they were barking because they heard me come out of the room. I go to the bathroom, do my stuff, and as I'm walking back to my room, I just had the urge to go into the living room. I saw my dogs now crying and shaking. Then, I noticed the TV was on, but it was just static playing on the TV. I was caught off guard because I knew that I didn't turn on the TV. I was a little weirded out, but I didn't think much of it. I walked to my room and close and lock my door. I've never done that, but something in my guts told me to do it. I go to lay on my bed. A few minutes pass by, and I hear the door jiggle, and then a knock comes after that. It's my mom, and she asks me if I went outside earlier. I said no, and her face dropped. I asked her what was wrong, and she didn't answer. A few days after that whole incident happened, she finally told me and my sister what happened. She said she was woken up by a noise, and my mom is not the type of person to hear something and just leave it alone. She said that when she went to check what the noise was, the back door was wide open, and our outside dog was at the corner of our backyard crying. Later on, I found out that a woman had committed suicide in our home after her girlfriend left her to go back with her ex-husband. Both the lady and her girlfriend used to host dog fights, with mainly pit bulls in the backyard. After that incident, more things started happening. We thought that she was a friendly ghost because she wasn't causing us any harm, but later on she tried to. One night, my family was staying over and my aunt woke up to her son crying and running around saying that a lady was trying to choke him. Another incident that happened to my cousin, she said that she woke up one night and was facing the closet and said that she saw a girl with long black hair just sitting in the closet. She thought that she was just a bit sleepy, so she turned her back to the closet. She had her eyes closed, and a few moments later, she said she saw the girl sitting next to her on the floor, looking at her. She would also do little things like open cabinets or open doors, but those 2 main incidents just made us realize that she was not a friendly ghost, and could be something more than just a ghost. I have more encounters that I could write an entire book on, but these experiences are from one of the houses that I've lived in that were haunted. So this was a collection of true, creepy, ghost, paranormal, haunting, those kinds of stories. You know the ones. Ones with unexplainable haunted situations and, genuinely creepy. Some of these stories were just downright scary, as always. Paranormal stories always have a nice place close to my heart, I suppose. Since it's where my channel started, way back. First 3 videos are paranormal videos back in December of 2019. Crazy to think we're going on 3 years now. Yeah. Hopefully you all enjoyed this collection of paranormal stories, and if you did, please do hit that thumbs up button. If you didn't, well, you can hit the thumbs down button if you choose. That's at your discretion. You can also subscribe to the channel if you liked what you heard and you're new and you haven't subscribed yet. Or you can support by doing things as complicated as hitting the thanks button, joining Patreon or memberships, or something as simple as leaving a comment. Just comment whatever you want. Comment, comment, comment. Comment the word comment and I will respond in a witty way. But really, only one of you should do that because it's probably going to be the same response each time. Who knows? Anyways, I hope you're all having a beautiful day, and I hope that I will see you on the next episode. But my friends, until that day arrives, I hope that you sleep well.